All right, let's just jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to treat sports medicine kind of like a true crime investigation. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating set of clinical protocols to solve a mystery that literally plagues millions of runners around the world. We are talking about the case of the collapsing knee, and we're going to completely demystify iliotibial band syndrome, or as you probably know it, ITB syndrome. So if you have ever felt totally defeated by a nagging running injury, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down the science of exactly what is going wrong in your body and, honestly, more importantly, how you can fix it. So let's kick things off with a question that so many of us have agonized over. Why does the outside of your knee hurt when you run? You know the feeling, right? You're cruising along, you're feeling great, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, there's this sharp, stabbing pain right on the outer side of your knee joint. It's incredibly frustrating. A lot of athletes just kind of write this off as generic runner's knee and feel completely defeated by it. They go out and buy expensive new shoes, they take weeks off from training, but the second they hit mile 3 again, bam, the pain is right back. Well, in this explainer, we're going to look at why that localized pain isn't just a random stroke of bad luck. It's actually a highly predictable mechanical failure. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this problem, just look at this number, 80%. According to the clinical data, a staggering 80% of all clinical visits related to running are for overuse injuries. Just think about that for a second. We aren't talking about acute trauma here, like where someone tripped over a tree root and twisted an ankle. No, these are conditions that stem from repetitive, low-level stress, combined with just not enough tissue recovery. Basically, your body is absorbing thousands of tiny impacts, and when your tissues just can't recover fast enough, you end up with microtrauma right down at the cellular level. And within that massive pie of overuse injuries, our specific culprit takes up a really major slice. ITB syndrome alone accounts for 10% of all running injuries. That means 1 in 10 injured runners walking into a physical therapy clinic right now is dealing with this exact same lateral knee pain. It's a massive roadblock for the running community as a whole, which means finding an actual permanent solution is absolutely crucial. But before we can solve the mystery, we have to throw out some of the old, outdated detective work. Historically, the medical paradigm for treating this was entirely passive. It was all about prolonged rest, bags of ice, and static stretching. But modern sports science has actually discredited complete rest for soft tissue injuries. Why? Because prolonged immobilization actually leads to muscle weakness and tendon atrophy. It makes things worse. So the real game changer here is pivoting to the new way of doing things, active loading and strength. By using controlled mechanical loading, we're actually triggering your cells to rebuild stronger. We aren't just resting the tissue, hoping it gets better. We are actively building its strength and its capacity to handle a load. Okay, let's examine the crime scene. The localized pain happens right here, at this bony bump on the outside of your knee. But here is the ultimate twist in our mystery. While the victim is the knee, the true culprit is actually hiding much further up the kinetic chain. The knee is essentially just a dumb hinge joint. It's caught in the crossfire of poor mechanics happening above and below it. So the pain is screaming at the knee, but the actual problem, that's up at the hip. And this chain reaction brilliantly illustrates exactly how the crime goes down. It's a 4-step process. Step 1, it all starts with weak hip muscles, specifically your glutes. Step 2, because those glutes are weak, when you lift one leg to run, your pelvis actually drops on that unsupported side. Step 3, that dropping pelvis physically drags your stance knee inward, making it collapse right towards your midline. And finally, step 4, that inward collapse pulls your IT band extremely tight, making it violently rub against the bone of your knee with every single step you take. Because of all that, the entire goal of our clinical intervention revolves around one key concept: lateral pelvic stability. Let's break down what that actually means. Lateral pelvic stability is really just the foundational strength you need to keep your hips perfectly level when you're standing on one leg. Think about it. If your hips stay level, your knee doesn't collapse inward. And if your knee doesn't collapse inward, well, the IT band doesn't rub painfully against the bone. It literally is that simple. We just have to train the hips to hold the pelvis flat. So how exactly do we achieve that stability? Well, I'm going to walk you through a progressive 3-step prehab workout. It's essentially an antidote designed to fix the root cause of the problem from the hip down. And notice, this isn't about stretching your IT band. The IT band is actually a piece of incredibly tough, fibrous tissue that you really can't stretch anyway. This is about actively loading the glute muscles so we can stop that pelvic drop from happening in the first place. Step 1 is our starting line. We're kicking things off with sideline clamshells. This is a super beginner-friendly, isolated movement that's perfect for the early phases of an injury. You just lie on your side, bend your knees, and lift the top knee like a clamshell opening, making sure to keep your feet totally glued together. And the best part? You don't even need any equipment for this. The entire purpose here is just to neurologically wake up those sleepy, inhibited glute muscles. Look, before we can ask your glutes to support your entire body weight while running, we have to gently remind your brain how to properly fire them. All right, let's move on to step 2, level the hips. Now that the glutes are awake, just lying on the ground isn't going to cut it anymore. Running is an upright, weight-bearing activity, right? So we actually need to train the muscle in a standing position to mimic the real-world mechanics of running. We have to teach that stance leg exactly how to support the pelvis against gravity. Which brings us to the core movement of our routine, the standing single leg abduction. Here is exactly how you execute it. You stand up straight on a single leg, and you loop a resistance band right around your ankles. Keeping the knee of the leg you're standing on just slightly bent and your pelvis completely level, you're going to move your free leg outward to about a 30-degree angle. The trick is, you want to control this entirely at the hip without tilting your upper body over. The clinical protocol recommends doing 3 sets of 15 repetitions per leg, with a solid 2-second pause right at the peak of the movement, and you do this every 48 hours. And what's really amazing about this exercise is that you are actually working both sides simultaneously. The moving leg is working to push against the band, sure, but the leg you are standing on, it's working incredibly hard just to keep your pelvis from dropping. And finally, we reach step 3, master your stability. Look, the standing abduction we just talked about is fantastic, but let's be real, running outdoors is never perfectly controlled. You're constantly dodging potholes, stepping off curbs, dealing with all sorts of unpredictable impact forces. So if we want to truly bulletproof those hip muscles against the chaotic nature of actual running, we have to introduce a little bit of controlled chaos into our training. And that is exactly what exercise 3 does. It's a single leg balance on an unstable surface. You grab a foam pad or, honestly, even just a folded up towel at home works great. And you stand on it barefoot on one leg. Because that surface is squishy and uneven, your foot, your ankle, and your hip have to work serious overtime, firing off all these micro adjustments constantly just to keep you upright. And to make it even harder, you're going to perform dynamic reaches with your free leg. You reach forward, out to the side, and backward. This forces your glutes to maintain that lateral pelvic stability under highly unstable conditions, which perfectly simulates the chaos of running on a trail or a bumpy road. Now, as you start doing these exercises, a major concern that always pops up is, wait, what if it hurts? Historically, we were always told to just stop immediately if we felt any pain at all. But modern clinicians use this standardized pain monitoring framework, and honestly, it's incredibly reassuring. It actually permits low-level discomfort during exercise. If you're doing light loading, a pain level of 2 out of 10 or less is totally acceptable. For medium loading, a 2 to 3 out of 10 is fine, and for high loading, even feeling a 4 or 5 out of 10 is acceptable. But, and this is absolutely crucial, here is the golden rule. Whatever discomfort you feel during the workout, your symptoms the very next morning absolutely must return to your baseline. If the pain is worse the next day, it just means you pushed a little too hard and you need to dial back the resistance next time. So, the mystery is officially solved. The victim was the knee, but the true culprit was a weak hip allowing the pelvis to drop. We've thrown out passive rest and replaced it with active, progressive loading using clamshells, standing abductions, and unstable balance work. Now, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Knowing that the true source of that painful knee friction is sitting right there in your glutes, how will you incorporate this active hip prehab into your weekly routine to finally conquer your injury? It's time to stop icing the victim, start training the culprit, and get yourself back out there on the road. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.